Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
All right. Is there anyone that is here for the first time or after a long absence? I think there are two new people in the room. Would you like to say your name? Jeffrey.
Okay.
Welcome, Tim and Jeffrey. Terry. Welcome, Terry. What about in Zoom? Is there anyone here for the first time in Zoom? I don't think so. Okay.
I'm back at Jim for a while. I haven't been here for a while.
Great. Welcome back, Jim. So we're going to go around the room and say our names. My name is Juan.
Marty.
Matthew.
Sam. My name is Jerry. My name is Mark.
Oh, Marcus.
My name is Henry.
My name is Michael.
Jack.
My name is Pat. Emeritus.
Tim. Jeffrey.
Risha.
Terry.
Tony.
See you.
Welcome everyone. And in Zoom we have Jeff, Christian, Bob, Steve, Marvin, James, Liz, Chris, Greg. There's someone here that I cannot see the name right now. Brian, George, Simon, Rich, Marcelo, Don, John, Chris, Ed, Frisco, Michael, Joe, Richard, Tom, and Tom, I think that's it. Okay. Our speaker today is Stephen Tierney. He's a professor, Emeritus of Counseling and Psychology at CIIS. Stephen began his Buddhist practice in 1993 and is now an ordained priest in the Soto Zen lineage of Suzuki Roshi. He's a licensed psychotherapist in private practice in San Francisco, specializing in addiction and recovery, life transitions, which I'm very grateful for, and resilience. His therapeutical approaches are grounded in mindfulness-based trauma-informed therapies. He's a co-founder and CEO of the San Francisco Mindfulness Foundation. Dr. Tierney is a certified suicide prevention and intervention trainer and offers community-based workshops to promote safer, healthier communities. He's also a dear friend and my Zen teacher. So welcome back, Stephen.
I want to start out today with just reading you a poem that some of you have probably heard before, but it just will ground us in what we want to talk about today. And it says, there is a brokenness out of which comes the unbroken, a shatteredness out of which blooms the unshatterable. There is a sorrow beyond all grief, which leads to joy, and a fragility out of whose depths emerge strength. There is a hollow space too vast for words, through which we pass with each loss, out of whose darkness we are sanctioned into being. There is a cry deeper than all sound, whose serrated edges cut the heart as we break open to a place inside which is unbreakable and whole, and we learn to sing. That's by Roshani, written in 1991. And so what I've been working with myself and with folks that I work with and study with and so forth, and some of the folks actually, is the idea of the importance of trust. We know in our community, we know in our sanghas, we know in the fellowship here, that it's really important that we cannot actually practice on Buddha's path by ourselves. It requires that we walk with others, that we have connection. And so one of the things that makes sense then is that we need to have a developed sense of trust. We walk in on a Sunday morning, first time, and you look around the room and you think, okay, I need to trust all these guys, that they're here for the right reasons and that they're going to operate from a wholehearted place. And that's a really important thing. And so I believe that for me and many people that I know, the capacity to trust that way is a delicate tool. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that and what we can do about that. But if we start just thinking about our country, we children are born in this country, and we all have an idea that they should be born healthy and safe, and that they should be well fed and clothed and validated. Children should be told that I love you and you're special and you have a great deal of capacity. But we know that for a lot of children, that's not true. And I'm not going to do a lot of doom and gloom, but we know that tonight in this country, 1 in 7 children will go to bed hungry. So the very basic stuff that we ought to be doing for children is not happening for a lot of children. And we know that for us as gay men and our allies and other friends who might be here or listening on Zoom, we know that validation part from the time we were very young, that wasn't the case for many of us. And we'll talk more about that in a second, but that we were not told from the beginning that we were perfect and wonderful just as we were, or even more damaging, we were told that until we were 3 years old or 6 years old and began to sing karaoke with Diana Ross and the Supremes, or whatever the particular version was. And my Teamster father looked at me and thought, you were special, but now you're too special. So we have this opportunity then to say, the very people that should have told us it was going to be okay didn't. And sometimes because they were afraid, they just didn't understand. And sometimes because they were trying to protect us. They thought, if you actually are gay or transgender or bisexual or asexual, the world's not going to be good to you. So I'm going to do something about that. And we'll talk about how that didn't work very well. There's an old Buddhist saying that says, we go up to achieve awakening, and then we come down to transform all beings. And to me, that's the core of my Buddhist practice. We come together and we sit on our cushions and we achieve a moment of stillness so that we're just in the present moment. And particularly here at GBF, what a gift. What a gift. We're in a room that we've chosen to come to with a whole group of other men here and in Zoom, in the Zoom rooms, that have chosen to be here. And that have chosen, men, women, I don't know who's in Zoom, so who's ever in Zoom with us. But we've chosen to be here. And we've chosen to be here because we want to walk the Buddhist path. And we all have different reasons why we want to do that. But we know that the Buddhist path is a path of wisdom and compassion, and a path of peace, ease, and authenticity. And so there's the word. We've come here to practice peace, ease, and authenticity. So it really is an invitation to us, and I think later in our practice, a requirement that we show up knowing through our sitting practice and through our study practice who we are authentically. And then to lead that life. And so we learn that through study, we learn that through working maybe with a teacher, we learn that through working with other members of the fellowship, we learn that through a consistent, steady, ongoing practice. And then we achieve, depending on your lineage, either a bunch of quick little awakenings, or when we all come together, we can all be awakened, depending, as I say, on your lineage. So we come together, we sit, we study, we talk to each other, we discuss, and we achieve awakening, enlightenment. We are introduced to the idea of peace and ease. So we go up to achieve enlightenment, and then we come down to transform all beings. So as we know, the Buddha said that each and every one of you, all of those faces on Zoom and all of these faces in this room, each and every one of you is Buddha. That's teaching. It's that simple. And so we each have something called Buddha nature, and it's really, really important. We can choose to notice it, or we can be uncomfortable with it and think, not me. He's a Buddha, and he's probably a Buddha, but I'm just working on it. I'm too new here. I don't know what that means. But what the Buddha meant by that is that we are people who have agreed to live a life of compassion and wisdom and love. And so we've agreed to do the teachings, to follow the teachings, to be disciples of the Buddha, to arouse bodhicitta, that mind of love and understanding that will allow us to fully live in our life of a Buddha. But we're each a Buddha. And so one of the things that has said to me around this issue of trust is that if we heard those voices when we were children or adolescents or last Thursday at your job, that said, you're too flamboyant, you're not right, you're not like the other boys, you're not whatever it was. We heard those voices and we began to take them in, and they were painful and alienating and traumatizing, frankly. But we heard them, and they were coming from people who were supposed to take care of us and supposed to love us and supposed to help us figure out how to be in the world. And so we heard those voices. And then what happens after a period of time is that those voices become part of our brain. And so when we step into a room, we say, look at all these really wonderful men, and they're all very wise and handsome and terrific on a Sunday morning. I don't fit in here. I'm too old. I'm not smart enough. I'm not Buddhist enough. I'm not whatever it is I might be. And it's the chorus from people that have told me that over the decades. But interestingly, the chorus is now in my own voice and in my own head. And so that's why we practice. For me, that's one of the main reasons we practice. Dan Layton says it like this, and it's an article called Awakening the Bodhisattva. And he says, Bodhisattvas, which is anybody who has decided to live the life of the Buddha, are beings dedicated to helping relieve the suffering for all, realizing universal awakening and leading all beings to the same awakening. Such practice cannot be merely about self-help or personal salvation. Bodhisattva practitioners are those who realize the deep interconnectedness of all beings. And so it seems to me that in a country that says liberty and justice for all, and in a spiritual practice that says leading all beings together, interconnected, to awakening, we should be like, wow, okay, it's guaranteed, both nationally in our country and in our Buddhist practice, that we're all good. Isn't that fabulous? But we know that sometimes it's true in the moment, or in a Sunday morning, or in some other piece. But what we also know is that in 2023 in this country, there are 340 separate pieces of legislation floating around in various states designed to roll back our rights to be who we are, to love who we want to love, to marry, to have children. And they want to criminalize family rights. They want to criminalize gender-affirming healthcare. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on doom and gloom, I promise. But those are the facts. That's the world in which we live. And in a powerful book that I've been reading recently by a woman named Sonia Renee Taylor, and it's called The Body is Not an Apology. And she says that the idea of creating shame in people serves to the benefit of the people that create the shame. And she says that and she encourages us to recognize the voices that pose those dangerous thoughts. Know that they are all around you. Know that they are bred, and that we are bred by them to feel shame. So sadly, sometimes the voices are coming from our head, as I say. I was talking to someone the other day who was telling me that it was actually a recovery meeting, and he said he didn't cry, hadn't cried in decades. And as he thought about it, he said, it's because my daddy trained that out of me. My daddy trained that out of me. He told me that I should be a man and men don't cry. He told me that I should stop whining because men don't whine. He told me many of those things. And I thought, that leads to this bigger problem, it seems to me, because if we're not allowed to cry when we feel like crying, if we're not allowed to hurt when we feel like hurting, if we're certainly not allowed to talk about it to other people because we seem weak and needy and vulnerable and so forth. So it then says, I can't bring my authentic self. And we all know the experience of being one person at home and one person at the job and another person in the clubs and another person with your partner or friends or family. And so one could argue that those 5 personas are the authentic me. But I think one could equally argue that the work of our Buddhist spiritual practice is to come in the present moment as this present being. And so that becomes really important. There's an article in Tricycle magazine that says, because clinging lies at the heart of suffering, and because there's a clinging in each sense of self, the Buddha advised using perception of not self as a strategy to dismantle that clinging. Whenever you see yourself identifying with anything stressful or inconsistent, you remind yourself that it's not self, that it's not worth clinging to, and it's not worth identifying with. This helps you to let go of it. When you do this thoroughly enough, it can lead to awakening. In this way, the not self teaching, and we all get confused about that when we say there's not self, it's like, well, I'm right here, you're right there, so there's two selves. So the not self is not the question. But the question that the Buddha was trying to ask us is what, when I do it, will lead me to long-term peace and happiness? What, when I do it, will lead me to long-term peace and happiness? And that, to me, is the gift of Buddhist practice, is that sense of the interconnectedness of all beings. And so the teaching over and over again in the sutras and the koans and the words handed down to us from the Buddha and from Dogen and other lineage teachers, is that we are in this together, and that it's not, and the Buddha is quoted as saying in some interpretation, it's not about you, it's not about you, it's about us. And so the path, particularly for those who might be Zen students, the path is the Bodhisattva path, which says we do not achieve awakening, we wait until all beings are ready to be awakened. We bring all beings with us. And so that's a really powerful teaching, particularly good when we think of our community. You know, we were told that we weren't like other boys and that we weren't good enough, strong enough, fast enough, handsome enough, whatever, by our parents that should have loved us and told us, by our siblings, by our friends. And then some of you probably had the experience of getting to the gay community and thinking, I've arrived. And then you were not thin enough or muscly enough or rich enough or didn't have a nice enough house in Provincetown, whatever it was. It's like, oh my God, a whole other set of voices. But that's where we arouse this idea of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is that arousal that we have inside of us that recognizes and seeks the truth and goodness, inspires our spiritual search and motivates our practice. So bodhicitta is we just make ourselves available. When we're sitting here on a Sunday morning, or when you're sitting at your homes or home temples, and wherever it is you sit during the week, and we say, I want to be fully present in this moment, and I want to be fully available for other folks, and in my community. And then what we realize is, you know what? At my core, I grew up being somebody who was afraid and who was defended and who developed some behaviors to be defended. But at my core, bodhicitta is the ability to love. And when I'm sitting on the cushion, being present in this moment, it's like, that's us. We have that. I don't need to be afraid here. I don't need to hang on to those skills here that told me that I needed to be protected at all times. So in the Theravada tradition, there are two joined concepts that I really appreciate and love, and it's samvega and pasada. Samvega is a spiritual urgency. So for some of us, when we come here to be in this group, we might feel that sense of spiritual urgency. This is a place of peace. This is a place where we're all together and we don't have to worry about all that other stuff that might be going on outside. But samvada comes, this sense of urgency, from three things. One is a sense of distress and disillusionment about life as it's usually lived. So a sense of distress or disillusionment about life as it's usually lived. The second one that arises in samvada is a sense of our own complicity or complacency. I want to talk about that one for just a second. And then the third one is a determination to find a more meaningful way forward. So the first one is that there are some things going on in life. People are hungry, people are unhoused. People are in various states, not so much here in California, but in various states are dealing with those 340 pieces of legislation where people have actually stopped, sat down at a table, taken out their laptops. I was going to say put pen to paper, but that's an age. Taken out their laptops and had meetings where they thought about ways to promulgate hate into the law. So it's not just random. It's that stuff is going on. So we should be distressed and disillusioned about that. And then the second piece of that, which is I talk to people about this a lot, is the sense that arises in us of our own complicity or complacency. And, I have no judgments about that, but what I mean by that, and I think what the teaching means by that, is how often we walk by somebody who's in distress, or we read, I'm very, very guilty is the right word because I actually do it intentionally. But if I pick up the New York Times, did you see me do that? It's actually on my telephone, but pick up the New York Times and start to read one of those articles that's distressing, I put it down because I've made an agreement with myself not to muddy up my mind and heart with news that's all too often disillusioning and distress. But then, as we're doing our practice and we're thinking about spiritual urgency, it's like, well, if I've decided that I'm not going to bother myself with all that stuff because it's overwhelming and I can't, and all of you have decided that, when we think about the third piece of that, which is a determination to find a more meaningful way, what does that mean, and how do we do that? And so the second part of that, and here's the good part, here's the part that really speaks to my heart, is the pasada. And it's a serene confidence that arises when you find a reliable way to address those other three concerns. And so for us, one of the very simplest things that the Buddha taught is when we sat together for 20 minutes this morning, that was 20 minutes that the 50 of us were not causing any chaos in the world. That's right. So there's a major contribution. 50 guys who are, I am sure, I don't know you all, but I'm pretty sure, well equipped to produce drama and chaos. And we decided to sit here and not produce any. And in fact, to breathe in chaos and breathe out peace, right? We decided to allow our practice to be a filter for some of the chaos that some of us may have come in here with. We often hear in the discussion part here at the fellowship and at some other places, people say, I was really uptight when I got in here today, and now I feel much better. Or I was really pissed off with my partner and my friend and my student, and now I feel much better. And it's that second piece, it's the pasada, a serene confidence that arises to find a reliable way to address those other three things. So I don't have to put on my fatigues and go out and demonstrate in the street. I don't have to do that. But what I have to do is sit here with all of you folks and arouse bodhicitta, arouse that sense of love and compassion. In 2020, in the height of all of those street demonstrations that were quite reasonable, a woman named Kimberly Jones that put out a video that some of you may have seen, and she was quite angry, an African-American woman, part of the Black Lives Matter movement. And she basically was responding, she said, to people who said that there were rioters in the streets and they were referring to them as looters. And the folks that get all their information from Fox News and the newscasters who spread that around and the politicians who care about that all started talking about, you can't loot buildings and you can't burn down your own neighborhoods. That doesn't make any sense. You're breaking the social contract. And so I don't know if any of you saw that video. Her name is Kimberly Jones. After you've had a cup of calming tea, you might want to watch it because the message is pretty good. But what she said is that we're not breaking the social contract. The social contract was broken. And she looked calmly, given the circumstances, into the camera and reminded this reporter who had encouraged her to speak of slavery, of the Jim Crow laws, of redlining, of the school to prison pipeline, and a poverty rate in the U.S. that's 16 times higher for Black than white Americans. And so what she said is that social contract wasn't written by us, wasn't designed by us, and isn't good for us. And so we didn't break the social contract, you did. And you're lucky, she said in closing, with a very calm at that point look on her face, you're lucky looting is all we're doing. So the response to that, as you might imagine at the time, was all over the place. And it really touched my heart. I wish that nobody had to be that angry, and I wish that nobody had to be that hurt. But her point was a good one, that there are social contracts that we are taught to live by. The social contracts that told us to be little boys that didn't cry, to be men that didn't appear vulnerable or weak, to be whatever else they told us to be. Anybody's father want them to be a football player or basketball player? And if you became one, great for you, if that's what you wanted. I myself was more interested in the pom-poms and the cheerleading, which Back in my day, they're now our male cheerleaders. Back in those days, I suggested that to my father at one point, just really to piss him off. And it worked. But we have this social contract that tells us who and what we should be. And it tells us that we should be something that they teach us to be, something that they can tolerate, something that doesn't make them uncomfortable. What are we doing for time?
We'll just still have we're at 11:30, so we have 10 more minutes.
Okay. I'll try not to take up all that time because I want to hear from all of you guys. But they try to teach us to be something else. And the fact of the matter is that Buddhism teaches us that our original goodness, our original nature, which we refer to as Buddha nature, Buddhahood, is not some distant state that we can only hope to someday realize, but it's the state of being that is available to all of us in this moment. So it's not who they told us to be, who they told us to love, how they told us to act, but it's our capacity to live with authenticity. That was too often, they tried to train it out of us. And it's that capacity that's the core of our Buddhist practice. So I strongly really believe that the message here today, on your website, it wonderfully says, as practicing Buddhists, we cherish the unique potential of each individual and each individual's unique mission in the world that only they can accomplish. Only they can accomplish. We believe that each person has the ability to contribute positive value to society in their own unique way. So what a wonderful foundational statement. Stop trying to train us to be something we're not. And instead, look at the garden of men that are in this room and on those Zoom screens and just celebrate that there's one of us in here that can say anything, do anything, write anything, fix anything. That would not be me. Build anything, also not me. There are folks between the 50 of us that are here that can play any sport and do a good job, all that stuff. But what we also know is there are folks that will be fully present, that will listen, that will accept what they hear, and that becomes a really positive thing. So I think that what we may have experienced, what I experienced in some of you as a break in that trust, our capacity to trust, our capacity to believe that we fit in and belong no matter where we are, got taken out of us, but it can come back. Because I believe that if we believe that we're all Buddhists, nobody puts Buddha in the corner. Right? So if you bully one of us, or if you discriminate against one of us, or if that voice in our head, that self-negative voice that regulates me to be quiet and to sit in the back and to not participate, that's bullying the Buddha. That's discriminating against the Buddha. And I think we're pretty clear that that's not something that any of us want to do. So Sonia Taylor in that book, This Body is Not an Apology, puts it this way: when we are no longer on autopilot, we are forced to deal with the discomfort of new actions. Think of self-love. Think of your bodhisattvas as resistance against decades-old calcified thoughts. Old habits of self-shaming thoughts and actions of shaming others, or acting from a sense of failure or lack. Anybody here ever act from a sense of failure or lack? Become uncomfortable and unskillful. Bodhicitta you will begin to feel that there is a path that you may walk. So I think that I'm going to skip some of that. What I want to do is, I think there's some things we can do about it, and I think I want to share some of those with you in the minutes we have left, and then hear from all of you about what you do. So I'm curious about how what tools we can use and what actions we can take as men, as gay men, as Buddhists, to repair broken trust. Because I believe that the folks that raised us, who tried to protect us, tried to box us in, tried to keep us safe, were embarrassed by us, or genuinely thought we needed protecting from who we really were. Whatever their motivation, ill or ill-conceived, for me, it broke trust with the people that should love me. It broke trust with the people in my schools and my jobs and my early religious experiences. So I think as Buddhists, we have some things we can do about that. So I'm going to just share a couple of those, and then I want to hear from all of you. One of those is a mantra practice. And a mantra practice can be very helpful for us. A mantra is a word or phrase that we chant repeatedly. that we can say over and over again. When I'm struggling in meditation, I've said this here before, but I'll say it again. When I'm struggling in meditation because my mind is wandering off, or I'm thinking about where we might go for lunch, or what bills I forgot to pay because, oh, by the way, it's the 19th or the 20th month, whatever it is. It's like, oh. So when those thoughts come up, my mantra that really became a mantra for my sitting practice is not now, not now. Just those two words over and over again, and return to my breathing and return to my practice. And I found, like with many mantras that we use in our practice, that it's also good out there. When I rise from my seat, or you rise from your cushions, and we go into the world and we take the mind of Zazen with us, that's a mantra that can be really useful. The fact that somebody is frantically disorganized does not mean that I have to have a crisis about it. So they can yell and scream and holler, and I can just say, not now, create a little space, right? So Sandy Taylor says that not only does the mantra practice soothe us out, but in fact, it changes us, right? So if we can, we all have heard about the pause between stimulus and response. There can be a pause. And in that pause, two things happen. One is the other person might get a chance to get centered a little bit and not keep screaming. Or if you're somebody that usually has engaged in your life and you suddenly pause and don't respond, there's a little side benefit. It's like really can freak people out. It's like, I'm yelling at you in a way that usually gets you to panic and freak out and yell back at me. It's like, no, not today, not now. So anything we can do to create that little pause, and it changes our neural pathways. Most of us have been on guard since we were little kids, especially in this room and on the Zoom rooms. We've been on guard since we were little kids. And so now we're saying, don't have to be on guard. Because I'm really not invested in your thinking. I'm not man enough, smart enough, fast enough, aging properly, whatever it is. I'm interested in what you have to say, but that's not going to change my being fully present in this moment. And so I don't have to respond to that. So that little mantra is one. And in Alan Sunaki's new book, and he's probably spoken here, he's the abbot at the Berkeley Zen Center. I think he may have been here. Some of you may know him, but he has a wonderful new book called Turning Words. And in that, he says that he and his wife developed a mantra. And just tell me when you hear this mantra if it would work for you, because when I heard it, but they didn't train it out of me. When I heard it, I started crying. But the mantra that she came up with is, I will not abandon you. Over and over, they say that to each other. And he actually has a video where he's made up a song about not abandoning you. But this simple vow to be present, no matter what, is such a powerful vow, because I didn't experience that, and I'm guessing some of you didn't experience that as we became dramatic, as we became flamboyant, as we became butch, as we became whatever it is we became at various moments on various days. People did abandon us. People did step away. There were parties that we weren't invited to. I was once told I was the perfect candidate for the job, except they couldn't hire a sissy for the job. It was 1975. And they used that word, very reassuring. But imagine someone saying what Alan and Lori say to each other, I may not be able to give you, when they talk about it, I may not be able to give you all that you need or that you think you need, but I will not turn away from you no matter what. And so that is a wonderful mantra that they repeat over and over again in their marriage, which I'm not sure how long it's been. It's been a very long time, and it's fun to see them together. So it seems to be working. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who all of you know, he says that there's a kind of precept or teaching that he calls the North Star precept. And so this particular teaching, I will not turn away from you no matter what. I am here, or I will not abandon you, or not enough, or whatever. What Thich Nhat Hanh says is that we need a North Star precept. And so that is to take something, one of the precepts that we study, or the three treasures, or taking refuge, and to put it in your own words. I am living a life of peace, ease, and authenticity. Maybe that's it. Allow me, Lord, to be in this present moment, to be nowhere else but here. Whatever it might be. But a North Star precept is one that you can use to guide you back to practice, that you can guide you, because I'm hoping that you all experience moments of serenity, moments of bodhicitta, moments of feeling the absolute joy of the interconnectedness of all of the folks in GBF and in our other communities. So Thich Nhat Hanh says that that you should have a North Star precept, and it's the star that guides you. You can always follow the North Star. And so the most important thing is to take the precepts, or the refuges, or whatever it is, and put them in your own words. And so that's one of my invitations to you all today. When we share, you can tell us if you have a mantra that you use regularly. But if you don't, I really encourage you and invite you in the next 2 days to sit down and, given the ages of some of us in here, at your yellow pad with a pen, or on your laptop or telephone, or the chip that you have in your glasses, or however you talk, or your watch, and come up with a mantra that you can use when times are tough. Get on the immune system, expecting it to be empty, and it was entirely filled. It's a petri dish this morning, entirely filled with folks who I had to come back to. I will not abandon you no matter what, even if you all clearly have tuberculosis and COVID, the flu, and whatever else you have. I will not abandon you. I'm going to say good morning to people and be pleasant. So it's that North Star thing that says, when we were talking before, my own complacency, when I step into a situation and I go to my judgmental place, or my fear place, or my defended place, because I was taught that I can't trust new situations, what can I do to come back? And Lori and Alan have really given me the mantra that I've been working with a lot lately, which is that I will not turn away from you no matter what. I am here. And the short version of that is I will not abandon you. So that's one tool we can use. And this is the last thing I'll say, I promise. But the second tool that I really want to offer you comes from some of the writings of Bell Hooks, who's her books are about love. And she uses the expression called enlightened witnesses. Enlightened witnesses. And an enlightened witness is somebody who you invite into your life, who you invite into your practice. In Buddhism, we actually call that kalyana mitta, a special friend in practice. But she says that these are enlightened witnesses, and that they can help us with our health and safety and happiness. And those things can be taught by the witnesses, because you invite someone in to look. And so I don't know if any of you this week had occasion to say something to someone in the office or in a store or on uni or even on the street, and walk away from that. And there've been moments that, I wonder if I handled that as skillfully as possible. And if you're like most of us, you probably found a way to walk another few steps and say, what the hell? And that builds up a seed store, as Thich Nhat Hanh talked about, a seed store of karma in us. And so we have these enlightened witnesses who are our friends, who we can say, the person in my office did such and such, and, I said such and such, what do you think? And if that person knows the kind of practice that you're trying to have, they can say, I might have said something different. Or you might have shut the hell up until you got out of there, whatever it might be, but not in a way that's condemning or whatever, just in a way that says there might be a different way to do something. And so it's a way of deepening our trust with other people. It's like, here's something I did that I don't feel good about, and so can you share that with me? But then also these enlightened witnesses to share things that we did do well, so that there is a record, a store of karma, of the good seeds and the bad seeds. So Pema Chodron, talking about this very thing, says the peace we are looking for is not the peace that crumbles as soon as there are difficulties or chaos. Whether we are seeking inner peace or global peace, it's a combination of the two. So I think I'm going to let it go right there, which was a lot enough, I hope. And whatever time we have left, we want to talk a little bit about your experiences of rebuilding trust, and so forth. And so, so we'll just leave it at that. Thank you, everybody. So any thoughts or any questions, first of all, or thoughts about what it's been like in your own life, in your own practice, to recognize that trusting others is maybe not a skill we come fully equipped with at this point, but that it's a skill that we're interested in rebuilding? Yes.
Actually, I have several things to say about that, but I'll try to say them briefly because whatever. I've been doing a mantra thing myself because when I've been really quiet, trying to maintain my focus and feeling the various things I know you can do to bring yourself on track, I suddenly realized that just repeating the words I'm saying, it almost brought me to tears when I realized how impactful that was, because it made me realize how totally unsafe I've been guarded I'm so often been. And then there's that trust thing that you're talking about. And I think that's a particularly challenging issue. And I think it's a really important one, because there is that initial betrayal of trust that we all had in our familial frames of reference. I think a lot of us, I know I certainly did, but now we're living in a time of world where we're talking about the realization of a failed social political contract. It's like, it's so overwhelming that, I find, I'm trying to do this trust thing with other people, and yet I'm feeling like described when you talked about how you felt about the New York Times. It's just like there's this withdrawal thing. It's just too painful. It's too painful to do, whether it's reading the newspaper, watching the news, hearing about all of this legislation that is so backward moving, or whether it's just going for a walk around Lake Merritt and not trying to experience the pain of all the homeless people that it's. But it's very challenging. I don't, I'm not even close to having reconciled what to do with that, but I totally appreciate you having identified those. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the mantras that I really find useful with people that are with me. I was about 60 years old, which was unfortunately a long time ago now. I was about 60 years old when working with a therapist and a Buddhist teacher. I was told that I behaved like someone who was constantly ready to fight, ready to, and they said and there are people in this call today, or in this room today, that have suffered physical, sexual, and attachment traumas. And so I don't mean it in any sense of it to say that we can mantra our way out of that sort of deep pain. Professional and religious and spiritual and friend help is needed, and we respect that. But the idea, they said to me, was, you're always on the defensive. And why is that? And then we talked about things that happened to me when I was a kid. And they said, oh, well, the reason you act like somebody who's not safe is because you weren't. Survival taught you that you were not safe, and so you needed to. And they said, but you're here now in San Francisco, in the Castro, sitting in this office talking to us. You're probably safe in the moment. Actually, we were probably at Harvey's, but wherever we were having the conversation, you're probably safe. And it was another, I agree with you, it was another one that brought me really wholehearted. It's like, oh, I am. And so all those skills I had that were, as we say in Buddhism, skillful at the time, no longer necessary. So just that's another wonderful mantra. I am safe. And even if it's in here on Sunday mornings for an hour, we can say, I am safe, and believe it. Other folks? Hi, Clint.
Your talk really hit home for me, and I want to thank you for it. And I think that I'm sure there are exceptions, but most of the gay men of my generation that I've had any intimate interaction with, like as friends and such, no matter of my generation, no matter how good their lives are going right now, and they're in successful relationships, and they're feeling in a good place as far as who they are. We've all had in our youth, or most of us in our youth, have just been filled with shame and self-hatred because of these messages that we received that you were talking about. And it's heartening to see that the relentless homophobia that young men in the 70s had to deal with is so much lighter now, though of course it seems like it's coming back again all over again. And I don't have a question, but just it really moves me to see a young gay man who isn't saddled with guilt and self-hatred. That seems to be so rare for the youth of the people in my generation. And it is encouraging. And, it took me years of practice and therapy and psychedelics to get to the place where I don't have that shame or don't feel like I have to, protect myself and be in the closet and not present myself authentically. And it's a long road, but I'm glad that we're moving in that direction. That's all I'm honest. When I was a young man, I never expected we would make the progress, the LGBT movement that we have made in over these years and these decades. So, I just want to say thank you for your talk. It really touched me.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I think it's, when we talk about being in the present moment, so we at the various ages that we are, the 50 of us that are here today, and we're in San Francisco or zoomed into San Francisco at least. And so, yeah, we can say, that rampant homophobia is gone.
Not gone, subdued.
Subdued. But, we have to remember that, that we live in a country where there are those 340 laws, and some of them are going to pass and have passed. Because there are places where people are not safe. And I think that mantra that Laurie and Alan used, that I will not abandon you, is one of the gifts that people our age can give to younger folks, and people in San Francisco and Boston and New York and LA can give to folks across the rest of the states and the country, is that we will not abandon you. We know what that was like, and we're not going back, so that younger people and those still to come are going to live through that. We will not allow that. And we create spaces like this one that are joyous and filled with delight. Even when we're sometimes disillusioned and worried, we can come here. And I think, how many folks feel better now than they felt when they walked in here a couple hours ago? Yeah. Yeah. So, and thank you for going along with that, whether it's true or not. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. You always worry when you ask a question like that. People are like, nah, we just want to go to lunch. Would you please shut up? But I think that's one of those mantras. We're safe. We're safe. We figured out a way to become safe. We worked hard. We're safe. And when we look at those younger folks in Idaho or Montana or wherever, wherever the family or the community, the school, the church might be not supportive and not encouraging authenticity, we can say through our joint practice and interconnectedness that nobody puts Buddha in the corner. You are Buddha, and we will never abandon you.
Yeah. And I don't want to downplay the difficulty that people in non-gay friendly parts of this country have to struggle with. But I will say, God, if we had internet back in the 70s, my transition to a well-adjusted person would have been a lot easier.
Yeah, exactly.
So at least we have that going on. Even in the most isolated parts of this country, it is possible to connect with parts of other gay men or LGBT people throughout the country.
I was recently talking to some young gay men in Ohio, rural Ohio, mid to southern Ohio, and they were saying some things had been proposed in their legislature, and they were saying that kind of stuff can never pass. It's 2023, blah, blah, blah. And I got triggered because it's like, yes, yes, it could. and look around, it is. But I thought, what a gift for them in that moment that they thought, no, the world is a gay and straight world, whatever. And we all get along with each other. And our generation, which they kept saying, our generation will not put up with that. And I thought, what a gift. You got to do some work. That's that in those three, in the Samveda, it's like that complacency thing. If you think it can't get bad, then you're making a mistake. So you have to be diligent. But what a gift that they're walking through life, not walking through, when we hear about legislation, even at our ages, and even though we're in San Francisco, we think that could happen, and we need to be vigilant, or we need to be scared and close down again or close the door. And the gift here is, nope, we're not doing it. We're not going to do that. But what a gift for them that they are able to go through life and go through college and build their careers without knowing the possibility in their minds of that. So, yeah, it's a different journey. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could comment on, we're the part of our conditioning, the notion of compassion, and this is a very minor example. But for example, my mother would never use the word queer. It's just not what she's going to do. She wasn't raised with that language. It does as a pejorative meaning, so forth and so on. So where does that notion of compassion and recognizing one's conditioning and upbringing play into all of this? You can come on that. So.
Yeah, I think, the book, it's called Order, by Desmond Tutu, and
Nelson Mandela or and Dalai Lama. And what they say in that book is that they are the men they are today, not in spite of what happened to them, but because of what happened to them. And these are both guys that spent time in prison and lost their countries and have been terribly oppressed, etc. And they writing this book together, they said, we are not the men we are today in spite of those experiences, but because of them. And so that's the fact that the whoever we are sitting here on this day in March in 2023, I am the accumulation of all of those karmic seeds, the good ones and the bad ones. And I've stored some of them in the good container and some in the bad container. And when I'm not careful, when I'm acting dizzy, they get mixed up. And so what we get to say, like your mom, how wonderful that she doesn't use the word queer, won't use the word queer, because she was raised in a time when that word was used, and it was not used in a way that she would want to refer to her son or any of his friends. And so her filters are in good shape, right? That she knows that word, and she, political people say, oh yes, I'm going to reclaim the word queer. And I don't know about the rest of you, but when that first started happening, I was traumatized. And, wonderful young students at CIIS, I started to say young lesbians. That would not be fair, although in the story I'm thinking of that was true. But she said to me, well, as a queer professor, what? I was taken aback until I realized that for her, that was a great compliment, that she was including she and I in a community that she saw. But I think that we are the accumulation of our experiences. And what our practice allows us to do is to arouse mindful awareness to say, these are ways I behave. These are ways I think. These are ways I react if I let myself react. And these are ways I can respond from a place of compassion and wisdom if I take the time to do it. But it's all based on, in my case, almost 72 years of accumulated experience, some of which was as a little effeminate gay boy in Detroit, Michigan in the 50s and 60s with a Teamster for a father. That's where it started.
Where does empathy come into play when I'm looking? All the statements you said were honest. I'm just wondering if you were like, I see this person and I recognize you, as being a part of your conditioning. Mm-hmm. And yes, you may hold those prejudices, or you may be less skillful, or all those things, and because that's what I do. I mean, my mother's great, so I don't really have a situation with mother, but I think I really take that to heart, is to create that spaciousness when I'm looking at others who are maybe spewing hatred or spewing whatever they're spewing. I think part of my job is to sort of to take that lens a little bit and to try to approach it with a bit of some spaciousness and some sense of empathy. So
I think there's two teachings of the Buddha that make sense. One is that it's not about me,
it's about us. And so I want the world to be safer and more joyous and delightful for all of us, and your mom and whoever it was said that thing to me at the university, for all of us. And what the Buddha said is, if you are a Buddha, that means you're a teacher. And you're not just teaching when you sit up here, you are teaching 24/7. So it is by the way you live, by the way you engage with people, by the way you enact the precepts, by the way you're illuminated by the Buddha's wisdom. And so we're teaching other people how to live a life of joy and ease and compassion and authenticity by everything we do. So when I encounter somebody who's mean and hateful, I can engage them in an argument. And we kind of all know at this point that there's certain element of folks that, you could have a debate with them. You just need to, sharpen your claws for the day. But it's not actually going to do any good. So instead, I could say, I wonder what life experiences they've had that caused them to hold that fear or that anger, and find a different way to engage, to take that backward step and say, I'm not going to put on a show for the community here by arguing with you, but I'm going to hold you in compassion. And until you get past this place of hurt and hate, I'm, as Lori and Alan said, I will not abandon you. I will show up as a Buddha for your Buddhahood. And sometimes that's going to be uncomfortable. And it doesn't mean I should be abused or allow somebody to keep screaming and hollering at me. I can certainly walk away. But I'm going to give it my best effort to at least show up. I will show up. Almost time for tea and cookies, huh?
Exactly. So thank you so much, Stephen. This was great. Right. So are there any announcements today?
I have an announcement.
Right.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matthew Garifano. And 2 weeks from today, 5 p.m. At Bird and Beckett Books and Records in Glen Park, I'm going to be putting on a show of kind of retrospective of the songs that I've been writing over the past 55 odd years. In the past, through the years, I've sung my songs as part of another program, but we decided, what the hell? And so it's at 5 p.m. It'd be lovely to see some of the Sangha members there too. So that's it.
Where is it again?
Oh, yeah, Bird and Beckett Books and Records in Glen Park on Chenery Street. It's a little bit of North Beach in the heart of Glen Park.
In where? Yeah.
April 2nd, no fooling, and at 5 p.m.
Why don't you somebody send an email out? Yeah, maybe that's.
Well, I
The Google group?
yeah, well, I felt like I didn't know what was worth sending it out to 200 people or something. Why not?
Why not? See, there's some of us that like it.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I'm the host today. Please stay and enjoy the company of the Sangha. There are refreshments and hot water. Please welcome yourself. And then if you have any dirty cups, just place them in the dishwasher. Everybody receive them. I'll go around with the Dana bowl to accept contributions to cover our expenses. Your generosity is appreciated. Donations in the range of $10 to $20 help the Sangha meet its expenses, which include honorariums for our Dharma speakers, rent for this beautiful center, monthly dinners we prepare for Larkin Street Youth Services, and our quarterly newsletters that mostly to people who are incarcerated. For those of you who are new, there is a sign-up sheet on the credenza. If you wish to be included and receive our Sangha membership directory, please sign up and include contact information you wish to share with the group. And lastly, some members go out for lunch after the meeting. Everyone is welcome, and the group meets at the front door around 12:30. So welcome.
Stephen, would like that if the reverend tracks would like to do it.
Could you have a session?
Well, yeah, okay, great. The power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness, which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the quality of all that lives. Thank you, everyone.
You're good.
Thank you, Stephen.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.